everyone. Welcome to Government Contractor Chat. We are going to get started now. I'm Lindsay Riegelsberger, Director of Operations and Business Development for Streamline Government Contracts. Streamline helps small to mid-sized government contractors who seek experienced, effective support with contract management that reduces risk, increases profits, and enhances reputations. We do this by negotiating teaming agreements, subcontracts, preparing estimates of completion when necessary, and speaking to contracting officers in their own language. We are the proud organizers of Government Contractor Chat, and we thank you for joining us today. I'm going to introduce our guest speaker now. Ashley Duwel is CEO of Duwel Dev and host of GovConHacks Podcast on YouTube. With over 13 years of experience in government contracting, Ashley has helped more than 750 businesses secure over $1 billion in contracts and subcontracts through coaching and professional services. Her expertise spans from guiding businesses through the complexities of federal procurement to scaling operations for long-term success in the government marketplace. Let's welcome Ashley Duwel.
Thank you so much, Lindsay and Karen, for having me, and to the Streamline GovCon team, and to our audience for joining us today. We're going to talk today a little bit about essential capability statement tips for government contractors. A little bit about myself, and thank you, Lindsay, for the introduction. I've been selling since basically I learned how to talk. And for the last 13, 14 years, I've been doing that in some capacity in the federal market, to not necessarily exclude SLED. But I am a government sales strategist and a huge data nerd. So I firmly believe in following the data and developing a strong sales strategy. I'm also a lifelong student of acquisition. So as many of you know, things change here often in the government market. So it is definitely a commitment to make sure you're staying up with those changes. And this is what we're going to get into today, and questions to answer, from the basics. What is a capability statement to how do we use it? How do we make sure we're meeting government expectations? What are the different types? How do we format it? What are different ways that we can communicate value? Capability statement basics is the first topic we're going to discuss. So according to the Small Business Administration, capability statement is a concise one-page document of your business competencies. So you're going to want to think of this as your business's resume. Its purpose is to provide specific information that will convince potential customers to do business with you. And when well written, it will differentiate your business from the competition. So this is more than just a checkbox. Now we're going to talk about how is it used in the government market. And this is according to GSA's website. We'll get into my opinions in a little later in the presentation. But the way that you will use, or the government will use, your capability statement is for agency market research during the acquisition process, planning, but not necessarily for source selection. It's often requested also by agencies for large acquisitions and complex requirements. You may have even seen it requested, a custom version tailored to a response like a source is sought or an RFI. Also, they use it to identify potential industry partners. So the rule of thumb is it's a one-page document. It does provide very specific information to attract potential business, and it differentiates you from your competition. Again, this comes from SBA as sort of the overarching rule. But if you've been in government contracting for any amount of time, you also know that there's probably an exception to most rules, right? And the exception as it relates to capability statement is when your targeted agency requests 2 pages. So when it's being requested as a part of a federal response, like a source of sought notice or RFI, it's going to call for you to answer specific questions in that RFI. So that's going to prompt you to have to tailor your capability statement to that specific opportunity. And let's talk about what it's also, right? Here's an example on the right-hand side. And maybe we'll talk a little bit further during the Q&A about what you notice most immediately about this example. It's also your primary tool when you're marketing to the federal government. It's often the very first impression that a buyer or prime contractor will have of your business, even before the conversation. It's awareness of your brand, the product or service you're offering, of your company. It's tailored to your audience. It's a live working document, just like your professional resume was in your career. And it's one of many versions. So the version we're talking about today is essentially going to be mostly the general version, right? This is the one that you're going to take with you to marketing events, conferences, trade shows. You're going to use it for outreach. It might be hosted on your website, downloadable in PDF format. This is what most folks see, maybe it's even on your LinkedIn profile. This is what most folks are going to see before they even ever sign an agreement or buy from you. The other type is also the agency tailored, right? This would be specific to maybe industry day that you attended regarding a specific solicitation. It could also be used in like the Air Force pitch days. It can be tailored to a specific agency's strategic plan. And then there's your solicitation tailored. The solicitation is typically going to dictate the length and content. So if you are in the capture phase of your sales process in the federal acquisition lifecycle, you're probably going to be tailoring your capability statement to that opportunity you saw on the forecast as one example. So when are you going to use it? We did touch on this a little bit earlier: trade shows, organic outreach, virtual events, agency hosted industry days, teaming engagements, networking opportunities, even site visits. On your LinkedIn business page, there should also be a copy pinned to the top for easy access to government buyers. LinkedIn is really the only platform that the government uses, the government buyers, and there are over 1 million points of contact in the federal market that are active on LinkedIn. All right. So this is a real important section, right? How do we make sure that we're meeting federal standards and expectations with our capability statement? Now, there are some loose rules, and then there's going to be strategic tips we talk about along the way. As far as what sections you need to include, this is what the government's going to be looking for. And when you have 6 to 8 seconds to get their attention, you want to make sure that you're giving them exactly what they're looking for, without much variance, right? That includes your corporate data, your capability narrative. This also can be called your corporate overview, otherwise simply put as your elevator pitch, right? Your core competencies. This is what you do well. Maybe not everything that you do. Because remember, if I'm targeting the Army about a specific construction job coming up, they're not going to care much about the other experience that I have in, say, janitorial, right? Differentiators. Excuse me. What makes you different than your competitors? Not really claims that everyone else can make. So for example, excellent customer service isn't a differentiator, because if I'm the government, says who, right? Now, 24/7 customer service is a differentiator, because that is a claim that not others can make. We'll dig into a little bit more on that later. Also, the last section is going to be your experience past performance. And I don't mean slap a bunch of logos on a PDF and call it a day. I mean, really use that opportunity to demonstrate value in that section. So breaking down a little bit deeper, what goes into corporate data, right? This is where your government codes live, your UEI and your CAGE code. Those are verifiable data points that the government can then go and punch into SAM, DSBS, or other sources to verify the information, because this is a verifiable document. Our top 5 NAICS with descriptions, and maybe our product service codes. I say with descriptions because if you happen to send your capability statement to a new government buyer, and your chances today are pretty likely that the person you're going to be communicating with might be new to their role, right? So knowing that, we also know that they may not have the NAICS code system memorized yet. So part of what I want you to think about as you go into this task of either creating or improving your existing capability statement, think about how you can make your buyer's life easier. The easier you make it for them to do business with you, the easier it will be for them to do so. Also, you want to include your location, right? For those of you who might be in trade, you might be in construction, you're not necessarily able to provide remote work. You might have a vested interest to place your work area on your capability statement to make it clear. I do business in the DMV area. Perhaps if there are non-federal certifications or trade licenses that are applicable, like in construction, you might need your general contractor license. Those are state by state. So work area would be important for those of you with those applicable factors. Third point here, and a lot of folks miss this surprisingly, is your government business point of contact with contact information. Now, if you're doing a lot of work, you have a lot of active contracts, I might also recommend putting an alternate point of contact. So thinking about your SAM registration, who did you list as government business point of contact? That's usually the qualifying owner of any set aside that you might already have a certification for, and then your alternate, their phone, their email address, etc. Next, your socioeconomic set-asides. I prefer to see the logos, so does the government. You don't have to waste a bunch of space spelling out that you're a service-disabled veteran-owned business or woman-owned business or 8A in 18 different places on your capability statement. Use that one logo, call it a day. The government will understand exactly what you're trying to communicate to them. And then others that you may want to include, and this varies by contractor, I've learned, your contract vehicle ID numbers. If you have a GSA schedule, for example, GSA gives you a pre-approved logo that you're able to utilize on your marketing materials. I say take that a step further. Put your number there, hyperlink it to your schedule in eLibrary or eBuy, making it very easy for them to just click and do business with you from there. Your website. A lot of folks have their website, very few hyperlink it. We don't really expect the government to go in and type https:// hyperlink it. They can click on it, they can go straight to your website and further evaluate you. Your LinkedIn profile is another option. All right, so let's dwell on this for a little bit because a lot of folks misrepresent their company on accident in their capability narrative. Now, what it's meant to be is a 2 to 3 sentence elevator pitch that's going to summarize your value. Talk more about your value and your results, less about your set asides, and explain similarly to how Lindsay did with her excellent introduction, how you're going to solve your prospects' problems. Sometimes what you do is not going to resonate with your targeted buyer until you touch on their pain point. So I always encourage my clients, let's spend a little bit of time on this because this elevator pitch, think about it. You're going to recite it at your marketing events. It's going to be on your website, on everywhere that your brand exists on the internet, and those who you're going to communicate with are going to hear this. So it will improve over time, but I do encourage you to spend a little bit more time on that. So I wanted to give a couple of examples before we got too far in the weeds so you can kind of see a visual of different ways to do this. Now I'm showing you these government examples first, specifically to demonstrate the variance that you're going to come across when targeting one agency or another. This specific example has been on HHS's website for more than a decade. So if you can rewind your mind back about 10 years ago, even probably longer, when we used to print hard documents out and carry them around the office, now, mostly everything's digital. So the back page is not necessarily as important. It could be 2 pages, but if you're going to use a second page, make sure that your first page has everything from the previous slide, all the sections that are required, just in case your agency requires only one page. The second example, now this is for you manufacturing folks that may be in the audience or tuning in later in the on-demand version. If you're targeting DLA and you have manufacturing capabilities, they don't give a hoot about your fancy capability statement. This is what they're asking for. This is a Word document that is publicly available on the internet. You can just type into your Google browser DLA capability statement. It will pop right up. This is also a hyperlinked link, so you can click on it from the PDF version of the slides as well. Nonetheless, this is a pre-fillable document that you will just fill out and check boxes where appropriate. If you don't see your capability here in the list, there are areas for you to manually add in this area. Now, you don't see it on this slide shot, but at the very bottom of this page on the Word document, you're going to see a custom email address that you're going to need to send your document to once you're done. So I show you this to show you that. Moral of the story here is it's important for you to know which agencies buy what you sell in order for you to be able to optimize this in a way that does help you sell your product rather than just check a box or service for that matter. All right, we're going to talk a little bit about best practices, do's and don'ts. And this is just common mistakes that I've learned along the way that folks have been challenged with, or things, repetitive mistakes that just need to be clarified. So one page or two, and you're probably going to hear conflicting information out there on agency websites. Some want one, some want no more than two. But it's important for you to just have the knowledge that anything longer than 2 pages is actually called a capability briefing. And that document is essentially for a different phase of the sales process. So if you're breaking up your capture strategy, your marketing version of your capability statement is going to come in the very beginning, hopefully way before that solicitation ever hits the light of day on SAM. Now, those of you who have ever sold a new product to government that there's no historic spend for will understand this more, that you have to perform your discovery to identify the pain points. Once you have the pain points and you get closer to a solution, that's where you're going to need those pages 3, 4, 5, and 6, right? To have that follow-up meeting, explain the solution, and help formulate that requirement. So we're not going to get in the weeds on a capability briefing today, but I did want you to have a general understanding of what the difference is between the two as it relates specifically to the length of your document. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about targeting. I'm sure everyone in the room has heard that old expression before, write your resume for the job you want. This is no different. So making sure that you're performing the necessary research before you even submit your capability statement. If you are targeting a specific agency or a specific opportunity, that will help you speak more directly to what their needs are. And rule of thumb is if you're not sure how to do this, the best place to start is with their strategic plan. It's available publicly on the website. Usually it's a 5-year plan. But if you're using that strategic plan and aligning your core competencies, your differentiators with how that's going to benefit, how your support is going to benefit their strategic plan, you've nailed the assignment, right? And then if the agency doesn't specify, don't make it too big. Just send what you have, right? Whether it's 1 page or 2 pages, unless they explicitly state, we want a 2-page capability statement, just send what you have. Now, when it comes to design, these are definitely some roadblocks and hurdles I've seen along the way. I've actually seen some very successful companies with some very crappy capability statements. And usually the pain point of those companies is that they've plateaued. They didn't necessarily need to do a whole lot of selling because they were great at proposals. They nailed the requirements, compliance, all of that stuff. But now they're not seeing as many proposals. So they're going back and they're filling in gaps in their marketing materials. Typically, best practice is avoid Word. Word is a document processor. It does not handle images very well. So when you want to do cool things like embed your logo, put your your certification logos on there and remove the background. You don't want it to interfere with your text. You want to maybe place it somewhere that Word won't allow you. This is why I'm making the recommendation. Canva, you can use a free version of Canva. Start with a resume template. You can use Adobe Illustrator, InDesign, even I've seen pretty decent ones in PowerPoint. Use whatever tool you're most comfortable with using already. And if you don't have a tool, Canva is a really easy tool that you can just kind of step in and plug and play. The other recommendation I'll make is have a process, right? I mentioned on the last slide, Word doesn't handle images well. But where Word does come into play in sort of having a quick, easy content repurposing process for a fast tailoring of a capability statement is going to be to serve as a master content document. On my master content document in my Word document, it's like a gazillion pages. It has all of our past performance, the narratives, the results, our case studies. It has all of our codes, which core competency is relevant to which code, because some of the work that you do involves more than one code, right? So we want to make sure that we're drawing that relation. And I give you this advice because when it comes to scaling, you're going to need to have to train someone else on this. So if you don't have a process yourself, it'll end up being a hurdle to, a faster sales process when you need to hand it off. I also recommend 2 columns, right? Have a Z pattern. Make it easy to guide your reader, not necessarily in one column, one list where they're reading all the way across the page, but you're able to utilize more space and fit more on one page if you guide them with a nice 2-column Z pattern like you see in most resumes. All right, now the most important part, and the articulation of value is not a barrier to entry that discriminates whether you're new or whether you're old. I struggle with it too, guys. We have a hard time really pointing out what our customers want to hear. What's our differentiator? What value are we bringing to the table and communicating that in our sales copy? So here's an exercise to allow you to get closer to creating content that will help you sell to your government buyers. The first thing and the most important thing I would say is to quantify your experience, right? I don't care if you're using professional, corporate, past performance at the federal level. You're still going to have experience to quantify, right? How many customers have you served? How many sites have you prepped? How many states have you worked in? How many square footage of space have you cleaned and sanitized? Depending on what your industry is, there are metrics that are related to your industry that if you really sat down and thought about it, you have all the resources to be able to pull some numbers out of it. And I challenge you not only to do this at a quantifiable level, but also at the project level. So when we talk about, okay, well, how do I communicate the results of this project? How much time did your solution save your customers? How many hours a month were saved? Was there a percentage of increase in sales, uptime? Whatever your industry metrics are, jot those down and templatize it so that you're capturing that 30 days after, 60 days after contract closeout or project closeout, we'll call it delivery, and capture those metrics. And if you make that a part of your ongoing process, you'll notice that your quality control improves and you're also proactively capturing the metrics that are going to help you better sell that solution to the next customer. All right, so I wanted to give some examples here of a capability narrative because this is not a terrible capability narrative, right? ABC Company provides dependable janitorial services to commercial and government clients. We specialize in routine cleaning, floor care, and maintenance, ensuring facilities are neat and organized. With a focus on meeting client expectations, our experienced team delivers reliable results tailored to a variety of environments. Sounds pretty good, right? Watch what happens when I build in some of these metrics. ABC Company delivers high-quality janitorial and facility maintenance services to commercial and government clients across 17 states. Managing 126 sites and over 1 million square feet of clean space, we combine advanced cleaning technologies and eco-friendly practices to meet the unique needs of our clients. Our team ensures facilities remain clean, safe, and operational, contributing to a healthier and more efficient environment. That is a great capability narrative that quantifies experience. Now, I just pulled some random numbers to come up with this example, just to give you an example of what that could look like and, allow you to feel the impact of the difference. So here is an example, and I think I placed this in the wrong place. However, still an example of like what your corporate data would look like. This is an example from one of the versions of my capability statement. Notice I didn't necessarily spell out HubZone small business, woman-owned small business. I placed the logos and the acronyms. It draws my reader's attention there. My website is hyperlinked here. Even my LinkedIn icon is hyperlinked to my LinkedIn profile to encourage a human connection. I have my NAICS codes, but only, the top relevant NAICS codes. I'm not going to include all of my training NAICS codes on a capability statement that I'm marketing, process improvement services for, right? So just to give you an example there, and we'll see the full version in just a few moments. All right. So core competencies. Here's an example of core competencies. And this one was done for a general version where they had 2 market segments in most of their work. So, best practice is we also break this out, one statement for remediation, another for engineering and consulting. But for this marketing version, I wanted to put this example in here to show you a way that you can categorize to make for a much easier read when it comes to your core competencies. Not all of your capabilities are core competencies, right? For example, a common elevator pitch in the IT space is, we're just like every other IT company you might run across, but what we're really good at is fill in the blank. In my case, process improvement, workflow automation, right? Your case is probably going to be different. Fill in the blank with that, which applies to you. So again, recommended if you have more than one version, if you work in more than one industry. They specifically do this work in one industry. So, that was the exception to the rule. And it's okay to have more than one core competency per industry. For example, if I'm a janitorial company, an obvious sort of segue and expansion is going to be into more of a facility support kind of role. So, you may not necessarily want to put as much emphasis on NAICS codes as you do core competencies to make sure that you're allowing yourself that room for growth. Digging a little bit different into differentiators, 2 to 3 reasons your targeted buyers should buy from you over your competitors. What makes your product or service special? What are popular features or benefits among your existing clients? So, for example, there have been a few compliments that my clients have paid me over the years, in part the way that I explain things. They're like, I've had someone explain this to me a gazillion times, Ashley, and it never made sense to me until you did it, right? That's one of my biggest differentiators. So I implore you to think back of, what compliments have your clients paid you? What's something they really appreciate about working with your company? So if you're struggling with coming up, what are my differentiators? Your past clients are going to be a great indication to lead you to, a starting point to allow you to differentiate yourself. They're going to improve and they're going to be bigger differentiators as your business grows. We all have to start somewhere though. Now, if there's something that you notice that you have that your competition doesn't, that's also a great differentiator to display, right? For a small business, one of our biggest differentiators, just in comparison to an other than small, is going to be that we have the ability to be more flexible. We are more agile. We can pivot as needed. So, agile development tends to be one heavily relied on differentiator if you tend to be in the IT development space. And what quality assurance measures do you have in place? So, for example, I use a system. All of our projects are managed in that system. We have, I mean, everything's consistent. I have a high level dashboard that allows me insight to see where everything's at simultaneously. That is a quality control measure that I can use essentially as a differentiator, the way that we handle our projects and keep everything streamlined. All right, so past performance examples. There's more than one way to get this job done, guys. And I encourage you to, and remember going back to that master content doc we talked about a few slides ago, I encourage you to have a repository for this stuff because you can quickly and easily go to that repository and pull different projects that you've worked on, matching different scopes of work for opportunities that you're bidding on for a quick tailoring process. If it's your general version, these are great examples. This one is a prime example. And I put these on here because, for clarity, I want to make sure that you understand because this is your business. Um, I am not an attorney. There is a government website that says you are not allowed to use our logos or impersonate us. So when we just slap a logo on our capability statement, there's an element of risk associated with that. I have never seen the government, send any cease and desist orders for folks using them on their capability statement. But you might get that counselor, resource partner somewhere along the line that tells you, oh no, take that off. I explain that to say that I have polled, I have a lot of friends and family in the government. I have spent the last 5 years having conversations with them and asking questions like, what do you appreciate that we do on the industry side to help you better evaluate us in the marketing phase? And all of them, 100% of them, appreciate seeing the logos when you have past performance because it quickly draws a reader's attention to that particular space. So that's my disclaimer. Ultimately, it is your business. It is up to you if you use them or don't use them. But I want to make sure you have all the information so that you can make an informed decision. This is an example for a prime contractor. This is an example for a subcontractor. Notice the end user was Air Force OIG, but we were very clear about what our role is on that project. We are not claiming that we're the prime, but we still did work for Air Force. So furthermore, as a subcontractor on this project, if we were using dollar amounts, in our format and our capability statement, we would be taking credit for the full dollar amount of the project. Whether you use dates, dollar amounts, contract numbers, the more information that you can provide to allow your government buyer to verify the information is preferable. But we all have to start somewhere. Not all of us have multi-million-dollar projects. So you may choose to omit the dollar amount. There's not a perfect science for this as long as you have demonstrated that you've done this work before in some capacity on your capability statement is what we want as a goal. So as far as formatting dues, this one is one that not many folks think about. I have at least 2,500 capability statements in my Google Drive that have the name capabilitystatement.pdf. If I was a government buyer and I wanted to buy something, that is not going to help me find you. So I recommend naming your file strategically. Name it with your company name and keywords that relate to your core competencies or brands you represent or work that you do, right? So, for example, mine would be Duwel Dev, Monday.com, process improvement, government sales, for example, right? That's going to help somebody easily find me in a database of thousands. Always, always, always send in PDF format. When you send a Word document, you are giving someone else control to edit your brand portfolio. I would always advise against sending anything but PDF. Also, it's safer for the government to open. So think about also your end user. Hyperlink whenever possible and use that 2-column strategy with a Z pattern. What we don't want to do is we don't want to send in Word. We want to refrain from underlining anything that isn't necessarily hyperlinked. We don't want paragraph heavy stuff. Don't lose your audience with a bunch of fluff. Try to eliminate any fluff or redundancy. If you mentioned your logos for your set-asides in your core comp or in your corporate data section, get it out of your capability narrative, get it out of the bottom, get just one place, mention your certifications, and that's it. Use that white space strategically. There's a lot of information we want the government to know. So having this big old header image with capability statement real big at the top is essentially a waste of space. They know what the document is, I assure you. Couple other creative ideas to wrap up the presentation. One thing, think about going to conferences, right? I do not carry a folder of 8.5 by 11s around with me. I just don't. What I have done personally, and this is totally up to you, is on my business card, I have a QR code. And that QR code links back to my website, capability statement, etc. Now, the government smartphones, the government issued smartphones do not have QR code capability for cybersecurity reasons, but what human on this planet do you know doesn't have a personal smartphone in their pocket, right? So it's still a pretty safe bet. Always hyperlink back to either your website, your capability statement. It could be your capability statement on your website, right? And then add your LinkedIn icon and hyperlink your business page, or if you don't have one yet, your professional profile to encourage that human connection. So to wrap up, a couple different examples, and I wanted to provide these because I alluded to the examples earlier in the presentation when I mentioned I'm not going to display my training experience when I'm trying to sell operational efficiency, right? So these are still both mine. One of them is targeted to more the IT space. This one is targeted more toward the work that I do in small business knowledge transfer courses like we're doing here today, coaching the Govology cohorts, etc. So two completely different targeted markets. I'm selling two completely different things, but it's not jumbled all into one statement. So not everybody is going to care that, I do 4-week procurement readiness with MBDA. They're going to care more about how I can save them time in their workflows. So I encourage you to approach your capability statement in that way. There might be more than just two versions that you have at the end of the day. So at this time, I'd like to go ahead and open the floor up for questions. And I have my contact information on this slide. If any of you need one-on-one support, if you just have questions, if you're stuck, whatever the case, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm an open book. Do we have any questions in the chat, Miss Lindsay? I don't
Yeah,
see
I'm
any.
opening that up now, and I also have some questions that we can get started here while we're waiting. What
Okay.
do you recommend for the experience section if the business is new?
Great question. So a lot of new contractors are like, well, my business hasn't done anything yet. What do I put here? And this comes from someone who has helped many subject matter experts maybe transition from maybe they worked with the government or for the government. Maybe you worked for another company on a government contract and you want to incorporate that experience that you have professionally to sell your business to government. To keep it very simple, change your heading. Do not call it past performance, just call it our experience, right? Saying our experience, and then in your description, when you write your results focused description, you're just going to clarify as a project manager with such and such, just like you would have done on your professional resume. And here's the thing, guys, is once you make your first sale, we're going to quickly replace that with the results from that business past performance now. So your professional experience is temporary, if that makes sense. But do feel free to use it if that's what you're working with in your early stages.
Okay, great. That makes sense. When is it appropriate to tailor your capability statement?
To a solicitation, I even would tailor my capability statement if I have a meeting. Like, for example, if you're exploring a new line of business, with someone. You maybe don't have all the wires crossed yet, right? But you're preparing a capability statement to say, this is the value I know that I can provide to the table. You might be tailoring it based on a specific conversation, to a specific prospect, to a specific solicitation, agency, strategic plan. So there are several different instances where you are going to want to tailor your statement, and don't let that be the limit. If there's another instance that I haven't mentioned that it would benefit you to modify your existing sales content, please by all means do.
Okay, that sounds great. And then let's see, anything in the chat? Please feel free to come on camera or drop questions in the chat should you have any.
No
Um,
question is a dumb question, guys. Yeah, please do. Even if I
oh,
already said it, I'll say it again.
absolutely. Okay, and how do you avoid looking like a jack of all and master of none?
Definitely by segmenting your markets. Um, there's a very common, and you'll hear this conflicting depending on who you talk to, right? There are companies like Deloitte, right? We'll use Deloitte, or one of the other large firms, GDIT or General Dynamics is one that comes to mind. They have
Mhm.
multiple subsidiaries, they have multiple lines of business. So if you go to their SAM registration, you're going to see probably 75 NAICS codes, right? When we're new to the industry, if we have 75 different NAICS codes, it ends up having the opposite effect on our buyers, and it paints us as a jack of all, master of none. So it ends up having the opposite effect. I usually recommend, if you're new to the space, I mean, in the first 2 years of your government contracting strategy, stick to what you can do right now on your SAM. And if what you can do right now happens to fall into two different industries, that's your trigger to separate those capability statements. And I say that because you might be providing project management in the construction space, but the pain points and your results are going to be so very different in the construction space than your project management work in the IT space. So that would be one very important opportunity to segment and create separate statements. You're still providing project management, but those are two different industries with two different sets of issues, if you will.
That makes sense. Absolutely. Okay, we have a question. I'm in the fitness industry and would like to jump into government contracts. How would I start?
Great question. My first question is, what do you do in the fitness industry? Are you selling products? Are you a personal trainer? Depending on what your answers are, I'd go and look at the historical data in a system like usaspending.gov. Who has purchased athletic training, or if is it
Yeah.
a gym that you have? I mean, there's a little bit more to it. Personal training, okay. So I'd look into athletic training, any type
I've
of
seen
athletic
that.
classes, and just do a couple of keyword searches in there. Identify, how much has been spent in the last few years, who spent it, how did they spend it? And if this is something that you guys need help with, I know that for a newbie entering this space, it's easy for me to give the instruction. And then when you get in there, you're like, wait a minute, what? So if you need any assistance with that, market research is my jam. I'm a huge data nerd. And it kind of all goes into developing your sales strategy. Skipping that step is going to leave you codependent on sam.gov, sitting around waiting for an opportunity that may never hit the light of day on that platform. So I definitely say there's value in spending the time in the beginning. That way you're going to know how the government buys your stuff so that you know how to engage, right? If they're buying your service through a micro purchase or a simplified acquisition, it might have just shown up on SAM as an award notice, not necessarily as a solicitation. So you have to engage differently with those opportunities. And I suspect, based on what you do, that might be the case. The website again is usaspending.gov. That sources from the Federal Procurement Data System. So if you're an old timer in the industry, you might know it as fpds.gov, but I like USA Spending for the easy user-friendly search filters.
Okay, I've just popped that in the chat. If you pop your contact information in the chat regarding personal training opportunities, while we don't handle BD capture directly, we have a wide range of colleagues that do and would be happy to get you in touch. Also, our next government contractor chat will be with Alexa Choi. She has expertise in filtering and finding select opportunities that may be suited to your personal needs, and other people on our list and network have the same capability or additional capabilities like that. So feel free to drop your contact information in the chat. We'll get you plugged in and connected with a few people. Elton, how are companies winning contracts these days?
Well, I mean, all different ways. They're proposing. I mean, you have to put your hat in the ring to win. If you don't bid, you're not going to win. There will come, the better that you get at capture and BD, and that is something that we do at Duwel Dev as well. When it comes to streamlining, the better you get at collecting your qualitative and quantitative intel before the solicitation hits the light of day on SAM, the higher your win rate increases, right? If we're not tracking the opportunity prior to it seeing the light of day on SAM, we're just not getting the best shot, right? So it also depends on what you do. If you're selling products, wait for the solicitation. It doesn't matter. That's the lowest price technically acceptable. But if you're in services, there's a little bit more pressure for you to develop a process, a strategy, and sort of maintain. Some folks will bid on SAM their first time and they'll get lucky, right? But there's basically the solicitation is going to dictate the scope of work, the evaluation criteria, and the instructions to offers. Those are the three most important sections that you have to pay attention to determine if you are or you're not. Credit cards are still, I believe, frozen. So there's no government purchase cards happening right now, though that 30 days is about to be up. There have been rumors of a FAR rewrite coming, so we are keeping our eyes out on that. How they're winning today may not be how they win tomorrow. So do keep your finger on the pulse of the ever-changing landscape of government contracting, because you will need to pivot, should something change that affects your strategy.
That's a great point. And you can also find Ashley on LinkedIn. If you've received our latest newsletter, there are links to all of our guest speakers, including Ashley's LinkedIn profiles. So you can reach out to them should you have any additional questions, or perhaps you might want to look into their services. Anything else on that, Ashley? I think we've wrapped up our Q&A.
One strategic piece of advice that I'll leave you with is, if you are at all hesitant of sending your capability statement before you understand what the buyers want, wait until after the meeting. Schedule the meeting with them. Make sure that you're in with your small business liaisons, because they're excellent at facilitating those meetings. Collect your intel during the meeting. Follow up with a tailored version of your capability statement. So I realize not everybody can, start hitting the ground doing that. But the better you get at the meetings, the better your results will be on the tailoring.
Okay, thank you so much, Ashley. Appreciate you sharing so much valuable content with all of us. It was very insightful, extremely helpful, exceptional job. Let's take a look at what's coming up next. Our Government Contractor Chat complimentary Zoom webinar series will be the third Wednesday of each month, excluding holidays and special times, from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Wednesday, April 16th, we will have Alexa Choi, Chief Operating Officer at G2 Exchange and podcast creator and host for GovCon Unfiltered, presenting Blueprint for Federal Growth: Building a Sustainable Federal Contracting Business Through People, Process, and Purpose. Wednesday, May 21st, we will have Shirley Collier, president of Scale to Market and host of Growth Masters Federal Podcast, presenting how small GovCons can thrive in a changing federal marketplace. To register for these webinars, you can scan the QR code on the screen now. Thank you for your time today. We'll see you in April.